Can we do the housekeeping?
I'm sorry, Mayor?
Thank you for participating in today's meeting. If attending in person, please do not connect to Zoom or teleconference while in the room. And please silence all devices. Click on the globe at the bottom of your screen to select either English or Spanish. Public comment will be taken after each item. If you are in the auditorium and wish to comment, please use the iPads located in the lobby. For meetings and other locations, please complete a blue speaker card and provide it to a South Coast AQMD employee. Speakers may be limited to a total of 3 minutes or less for all agenda items. Times may be shortened to ensure all speakers can be heard. A countdown timer will be displayed on the screen for each public comment. More time will be allotted for Spanish translation that is not simultaneous. For questions or issues on making public comment, please call the public advisor at 909-396-3247. That's 909-396-3247. Please adhere to the speaker time limit and treat others with courtesy, civility, and respect. Failure to do so can result in your mic being muted or you being removed from the meeting. Be aware that this meeting is being recorded. By participating, you authorize recording of audio and visual content presented during the live event and consent to subsequent use of the recording in the public domain by South Coast AQMD.
I call to order the Station Resource Committee for February and ask for roll call.
Councilmember Cacchiotti,
Here.
Senator Delgado,
I'm here.
Supervisor Mitchell,
Present.
Board Member Padilla Campos, absent. Mayor Salache, absent. And Chair McCallum.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. First item is an update on our proposed amended Rule 1118, control of emissions from refinery flares. And Michael Kraus, our eminent Assistant Deputy Executive Officer, will make his presentation. Thank you, Mike.
Great. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee, for inviting us to present to you today our proposed amendments to our Rule 1118. This is the rule that's regulating emissions from refinery flares. Next slide, please. So by way of background, this rule was first established and adopted by our board back in 1998. The objective was to control and minimize emissions from the refinery flares. Our last amendment was in 2017, at which time we were looking to gather some more data information from the refineries to look for ways and seek ideas on how to continue to minimize flaring at refineries. Today, we're looking at now the actual actions we're proposing to take in order to do such. In addition, we're also fulfilling some commitments that we made in our CERP, particularly the one from Wilmington, Carson, and West Long Beach. For our public process so far, we've gone through 5 working group meetings. We've had a community focus meeting, which is tonight. We've had a public workshop. And of course, as always, there are numerous meetings with our stakeholders, as well as site visits. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the key requirements that we're seeking. So first off, we're going to lower our existing sulfur dioxide performance target. As a way of reminder, our performance target goes like this. They accumulate the sulfur dioxide emissions that are coming from flaring on an annual basis. And that is there's a formula by which they divide it by the size or the capacity of that refinery. Therefore, there's an equitable for both a large or a smaller type of facility. And they're supposed to meet a target goal. Currently, the rule has them at 0.5. And how that works is that if they exceed that standard, they have to file a flare minimization plan, seeking out what caused the exceedance, seeking out also or suggesting the actions that could be taken to ensure that the next following year they will be under that standard. And in addition, it's coupled with a mitigation fee, as sort of a disincentive to, or as an incentive, I should say, to meet that target the following year with those actions taken. Our proposal today is to cut that standard in half, and that would result in even further emission reductions by about 50%. But the process would be the same: exceeding that standard, filing a flare minimization plan, taking action, and of course, coupling that with mitigation fees. Now, some exciting new things that we're actually adding and introducing to the rule that has not existed before. The first thing is establishing a NOx performance standard. This is coming from flares particularly at hydrogen plants. So hydrogen plants have basically no sulfur concentration, so it wouldn't fall under that the SO2 flare standard. Instead, it's its own flare, but we still felt it was important to introduce a standard there as well, and again follow that same procedure: exceeding a standard, filing a flare minimization plan, taking action, and paying a mitigation fee. In addition, we were introducing an annual throughput limit for other types of flares that are operating out at the facility. These are what's called clean service flares. So once again, they have low sulfur concentration, but they are burning things like natural gas and liquefied petroleum gases such as butane or propane or something like that. And in those cases, we're going to be looking at a limit based on a standard cubic feet of operation of that flare. What we've discovered out there, and there's only a few of those, is that some of those flares have done some kind of process change or some equipment additions by which really reduces the emissions coming from those flares. Bottom line is there's something that can be done in order to produce a cleaner emitting flare. And the other ones maybe not have taken that action, so we're going to bring them into the fold and get those and actual real reductions from those flares. And we've been working with the facilities with viable, feasible pathways forward in order to achieve that. And then finally, there was a question about the mitigation fees. You know, these fees were established back in 2005, 7 for the rule, sorry, and they have not changed since. So there was a question of why is it still a deterrent, you know, with those fees if we haven't really made them appropriate to today's standards. So what we did was we looked back at the fees and have applied a consumer price index. So we applied a CPI to them to establish a new fee, which we're proposing. In addition, we've set up a system by which we don't need to keep revisiting the rule by having an automatic a calculation of that CPI in the future years ongoing. Next slide, please. Okay, so what does all this mean? So this means some really great results when it comes down to the numbers. So what you see here under the blue columns are both our baseline emissions, the actual reductions we're seeking in the different pollutants, whether it's sulfur dioxide, volatile organic compounds, or nitrogen oxides. But more importantly, you could see what great reductions could be occurred as a result of these proposed amendments: 30% reduction in SOx, 16% in VOC, et cetera. Now, on the yellow side, this was important to kind of demonstrate how we're fulfilling the commitments made in that SERP. So again, there was a level of reductions quantified, and again, this is specific to the area, so that's why the number is a subset of the overall, because not all the refineries are located within this jurisdiction. But what we did want to demonstrate is on the far right column there are the actual reductions the SERP is seeking. So they quantified those numbers, and so once everything played out with our rule amendments and we crunched all the numbers, we recognized that as a result of these proposed amendments, we're going to be fulfilling, at least from this rule, 2 out of 3 of those emission reduction goals set out in the SERP. So to give you an example, for the sulfur dioxide, the reductions from this rule proposal for that region is going to be 13.8 tons per year reduction in SOx. The goal set out in the SERP was 11. So we've over exceeded the goal in there, otherwise a 51% reduction. And that was another goal. So it was both the reduction in mass quantity as well as percentage. Similarly, VOC, the goal was 1, we're going to achieve 3.3. The goal for NOx was 19 overall for the SERP, but I just want to caveat here, that particular goal was going to be achieved by 2 parts: the flare refinery as well as our flare, as well as our refinery rule. And as you know, our 1109.1 rule really made a big reduction achievement. We footnoted it here at about 1,600 tons per year we're going to be gaining from that rule. So we've way exceeded the 19 in our goals. Next slide, please. Just going to highlight some other amendments along with the rule. So everyone knows we're going to be clarifying and restructuring a bit of the rule amendment. I think when some people look at our strikeout underline version, they're like, whoa, looks like a lot of new stuff. But actually, it's because we've moved things around and sort of reformatted to let the rule flow a little better, be better understandable. And I think everyone's on board with that. The next one we're going to be doing is updating our existing FENS program. That's our flare event notification system. We're coming up with new, more streamlined ways by which, for example, a facility can provide the data and then also accumulate reports out of it. On the flip side, the community can also download a lot of this data in more accessible ways in order for them to better understand what it all means. And again, that's that third point about standardizing some of that data. And then finally, we'll be adding some references to the federal refinery sector rule, which was requested as well. Next slide, please. On the impact side, so of the California Environmental Quality Act, these potential actions being taken by the facilities in order to meet some of these standards were determined not to be significant adverse impacts to the environment. And so we're going down the route of issuing a notice of exemption. And on the socioeconomic side, we're looking at all of those cost impacts and analyzing those. And those will be put into the socioeconomic impact report, which will be available at the 30 days coming up. Next slide, please. So with regards to our rule schedule, we're planning to set the rule in March and hoping to take it for the board consideration in April. And I'm here to take any questions.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions, comments from our committee members? Online? Nothing here?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one, Mike, you mentioned on the, I think it was page 3, the annual throughput limit was 15,000 million BTUs per year for non-hydrogen. So do we know, is it a type of equipment that reduces it so much in some facilities, but other facilities, that other staff has been out there? We aware of the type of equipment, or is it
Sure.
practice or something? What is it?
Sure. So what staff did was we looked at the operational activity level, right? Because this is a standard cubic feet level, right? It's not an emission level, but it's standard cubic, but that relates to it. Anyway, we looked at all the past data from all the different flares affected by this. And we looked also then at the flare that was actually achieved in practice, these lower emission values, right? So we applied that cost to it, and we did a cost-effective analysis as to how far could we reduce those emissions down and still be within that cost-effective, and that's how we came with that threshold.
So the one flare that's working, say there's 100 flares, one's reducing it so much.
Yes.
What's the reason? I'm still trying to get the reason. Is there?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah.
So there's different ways that can be done. Three kind of come to mind. There's this one, not to get into the weeds, there's a chiller, basically, that's established in the process of them going to the flare, which basically reduces the amount of gas that goes up and gets flared. That's one process. Another one, I'm not quite sure the total details, but it does, again, similarly, it changes its process to reduce the amount of gas that actually goes up into the flare, so all process change. And the third one a facility is considering is actually replacing the flare in and of itself and just get a cleaner burning, clean service flare.
And as you examine it, you examine the cost of that.
All of them.
All of them, so,
Yep,
okay.
yep,
And is
yep.
it reasonable or in your estimation?
Yes, these are all cost-effective methods, yes.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Any other committee members?
Yes, Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Can I hear you? Yes, I can. Holly?
Oh, thank you. Good morning.
Good
I
morning.
just have a quick question, because I know that this has been a priority for a couple of the AB 617 communities that I represent, namely Wilmington and Carson. I'm wondering, since this process, phase 1 began in 2017, what took us so long to get to phase 2 of the process?
Thank you for the question. Yes, so in that 2017 amendment, there was a request to the refineries to compile what we call a scoping plan. So we needed to provide them that necessary time for them to go and look at all the different potential ways to do flare minimization, and then go ahead and submit those plans to us, and then for our review. I will say, I will say that the same staff that worked on 1109.1 is the same staff that's working on this. So we did prioritize that refinery rule first, and then we're now bringing this rule up now.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor. I've always had a question. Why does the socioeconomic report never come to committee?
So the first step there is, so the state law requires a 30-day release for that socioeconomic report. So they do try to, they need to meet that deadline. But I think the second thing also is, like with sequence socio, they sort of the tail end, right? You need to get the proposed amendment and all the data to compile in order to analyze it. And and there's like cost effectiveness and.
It's cost effectiveness analysis is important, and it always seems to be the last thing that's done, and it never comes to committee and winds up at the board. My desire would be to have it come to committee also. I don't know if that's even possible, but
The cost effectiveness does go to committee and does go to the public workshop. So we do present that.
It will
It's the,
it
but
will
the
come to this
overall
committee?
socioeconomic analysis, I think that part, that does come after, but that's looking at the overall economic, regional impacts.
The social economic analysis for this rule will come to this committee?
No, the socioeconomic analysis will come 30 days before the public hearing, but so we are trying to accelerate that in the process. But that one comes at the very, very end. But the cost effectiveness does come to stationary source.
Well, like I said before, it's my desire if we can do it to bring the socioeconomic analysis to committee. But, if we can do that or not. Any other things on this before we go to public comment? Okay, we'll call for public comment. Anyone who wishes to comment on this item, please raise your hand.
I see one hand raised, Wayne. I see, is it Julia May? Julia, go ahead, please. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Julia May, good morning. I'm from Communities for a Better Environment, senior scientist, and we were the ones who proposed adding flaring to the AB 617 plan. So we thank you implementing it. It still needs big improvements. Thanks for the staff working to bring flaring back into alignment toward emission reduction, since in recent years, flaring has increased steadily from about 129 unplanned events to 232 unplanned flaring events over the last few years. So it's very cost effective for refineries to prevent accidents that cause flaring because breakdowns are expensive. Because flares are designed to burn extremely large gases during a sudden shutdown, they can and do emit very large levels of SOx, VOCs, and NOx in a short time, burdening already burdened refinery communities all at once. Couple examples. One was 65,000 pounds of SOx, another 43,000 pounds, and many other large events in the thousands of pounds per event. So even after decades, this is still a major problem, and it's gotten worse recently. Unfortunately, the 0.25 tons per million barrels of crude oil is a standard that refineries already achieved in the past. One refinery has met that since 2012. So it's really more like a backstop than an improvement. And in fact, your staff's data shows refineries have met 0.10 tons per million barrels, a far tighter standard. One refinery met that since 2012. Most of the others met that many years in a row. So that needs to be much tighter. There's also a VOC annual target is completely missing. There are a number of very high VOC flaring events with very low SOx, so the SOx standard doesn't help us. We requested a VOC standard since the 2017 rulemaking, and we were told additional measures would be considered in the next round. Now we're in the next round, and there is still none. So communities need to see these readily available controls. They are cost effective. They not only cut flaring, they improve safety. They cut these massive amounts of other pollutants like black clouds of smoke that can come out with flaring. Just last Thursday, there were 3 days of major events. And this is common in our communities. Tonight, there's going to be a workshop that we appreciate staff is providing at night for community members, and our members are coming to attend to that. And we'll provide the board and the staff more detail in writing. But we would, we think the rule is going to need to.
Thank you, Julia. Next speaker is Oscar Espino Padron. Oscar, go ahead, please. You got 3 minutes.
Hi, yes, good morning. Oscar Espino Padron, Senior Attorney at Earth Justice. I first want to thank staff for their work on this rule and getting this to the finish line. But I do want to echo the concerns that have been raised by Julia May at CBE. We also believe that a more stringent performance target should be adopted for SOx that goes beyond what refineries are already achieving. As Julia summarized, staff should not be leaving additional emission reductions on the table. In addition, as staff knows, right, and has observed, SOx, NOx, VOCs are all typical flare emissions. But staff has not developed a performance target for VOCs that we all know include many hazardous cancer-causing pollutants. And so we encourage staff to look into proposing some performance target to address VOC emissions, which, again, as Julia highlighted, do occur, right? So there are incidents of flaring where VOCs are being released in significant quantities of concern to surrounding communities. And so we again thank staff for their work on this, but we hope that staff is responsive to these concerns that remain with the proposed rule. Thank you.
Oscar, thank you so much. Our final speaker, and we're going to close public comment after Harvey Etter speaks. Harvey, it's your turn to speak. You've got 3 minutes. Welcome, Harvey.
Stay on topic.
Please stay on topic.
Hello, good morning. Am I being heard?
Yes, Harvey, thank you.
Okay. My name is Harvey Etter. I'm speaking for myself and for the Public Solar Power Coalition. I'd like to thank the staff and Mike for the presentation. I'm glad to hear this is going on. We've got a lot to learn, a lot to use in this. I see an excellent opportunity here for transferring the knowledge that we've gained here and will continue to gain through experience and whatnot and evaluation to flaring for these factory farms for cattle. Okay, so those numbers we've been advocating all along, rather than just emitting it into the atmosphere and getting these huge numbers, which they get $100, $200 a ton for NOx, 10 times more than the greenhouse gas fund. But it ought to be controlled by flaring. And this is further evidence that this should be looked at and done. And they should not do those numbers that have outcompeted solar. Okay, now we got other stuff going for solar and whatnot. The cost has come down with the Sunshot program. So this goes back also on methane. Okay, that there's international efforts now. We brought this up 8 years ago. We brought the Sunshot to you, the 8 progress reports from 16. It was a 5-year plan from 11 to 16, and it was totally ignored. And the 12th of August, we put in there, and they said that with the new numbers on carbon, instead of 10 to 20, which was cited by Dr. Reith, and this climate stuff is garbage, that it's at least 120 as per Cambridge University Professor Emeritus Sir David King, who said it's at least 120, and that's based, it was 700, and it's now 1900, and about 20%, a third of the Earth is 2,500, okay? So that 120 is times 2, at least 240, and it's another 100 from nitrous oxide. It's double with CO2 equivalent. It was 8 years ago, and not being talked about. And that's what we got to deal with. And they say, and also the Arctic is melting. We gave a cover article from National Geographic. They didn't have the chutzpah to say melting. They said it's thawing. Okay, enough is enough, man. We got to deal with the real. And we got to deal with it now. We got to get rid of these refineries, minimize this stuff, to take natural gas out of the loop, and start doing direct solar thermal. And it's taken over the market. It's outcompeted it. 3 years ago, 95% when it was solar and wind, and 60% more solar, and 60% was controlled by fossil fuel companies. That's IEA numbers. We cannot let this continue either internationally or here in River City. It's time to deal with this now, and the equity go to the workers and the communities, and to the.
Thank you, Harvey, for your comments. Committee, any other questions or comments on this issue? Seeing no hands raised, we'll move on then.
Excuse me, Chair McCallum,
Yes.
just wanted to note that Mayor Salache joined the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I saw him sitting there. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next, we'll go on to our annual reclaim audit report for 2022 compliance year, presented by Jason Espel, our Deputy Executive Officer. Jason.
All right. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members. I'll be presenting the annual reclaim audit report for the 2022 compliance year. Next slide, please, Paul. So this is the 29th year of the reclaim annual audit to the board since the program adoption in 1993. Reclaim, of course, is the district's cap and trade program for large NOx and SOx sources, which was adopted to achieve emission reductions through emission caps in the use of reclaimed trading credits, or RTCs, and it's an alternative to the typical standard command and control requirements we see in other programs. This program was designed to allow for this compliance flexibility while achieving regional NOx and SOx emission reductions. But at the same time, these facilities are subject to all other district rules for other pollutants. Next slide, please, Paul. So under reclaim, each facility has an emissions cap or allocation, as we call it, that was determined when the facilities enter the program. In order to meet future emission reduction targets, the district applies a % reduction to each facility's allocation, and we also refer to these as emission shaves. So at the top, the facility that reduces emissions by installing control equipment or some other means may then have a surplus of credits to sell that might offset the cost of installing said control equipment. In the lower picture, the facility on the left that decides not to reduce their emissions despite their declining emission allocation, they may need to buy credits to increase their emission cap. So this creates an incentive market, and business decisions dictate facility strategy within the market program. So this is a very simplified version of what happens, but there are many requirements to ensure that the validity of the RTCs and the emissions from these facilities. Next slide, please, Paul. In 2018, the board directed staff to transition reclaim back to a command and control framework to ensure that all facilities install best available retrofit control technology, or BART. The board has adopted 28 of these BART landing rules, and as facilities implement these BART rules, emission reductions are expected, which would then increase the availability of RTCs. Next slide, please. So our rules do require this annual audit of the program, and this report covers our compliance year 2022. The facilities are divided between 2 cycles, and the compliance year actually covers a calendar year and a half. The program currently includes 229 facilities, which is a drop of 8 facilities from the previous reporting year due to facility consolidations and shutdowns. Next slide. Overall, the audit shows that Reclaim continues to meet its program emission goals with NOx and SOx emissions below their respective allocations. The program has incorporated a number of emission shaves over the years and through rule amendments to reflect updated BART levels. The last SOx shave was adopted in 2013 and concluded in 2019. Most recently, a large NOx shave was adopted in 2015 for implementation from 2016, continuing through this compliance year 2022. So leading into last compliance year, 2021, the allocation reductions were at 8 tons of NOx per day, and an additional 4 tons of NOx per day were shaved for this 2022 compliance year. After 2022, emission allocations are being held constant without further NOx reductions through reclaim. And NOx reductions from this point forward are expected through the backed landing rules. Next slide, please. So for the next few slides, we're going to take a a graphical look at the historical NOx and SOx emissions. So this slide shows the NOx emission trends for the program, which shows actual emissions have been consistently below the allocations as required. And the lone exception was during the energy crisis in around the year 2000. With the large reduction of 4 tons, this is the closest that emissions have been to allocation since the 2000 timeframe, but the marked reductions are in progress, as I said. Next slide, please, Paul. So this slide zooms in on the years of the most recent 12 ton per day NOx shave, and it better shows the impacts of the NOx RTC supplies from 2016 through 2022. So as NOx RTC supplies waned during the shave, RTC prices were affected as part of the design of the market system, which staff reported to the board last year. Moving forward, reductions through reclaim will cease, and a calming of RTC prices is being observed. Next slide. So these are our SOx emission trends, which show ongoing emission levels below allocations for the life of the program. The SOx shave did end a couple years ago, and program allocations are currently projected to be consistent. Next slide, please. So the audit requires staff to assess compliance rates, and for this audit, both NOx and SOx compliance rates were very high, each greater than 90%. For NOx, there were 17 facilities, which with exceedances, which represents about 4% of the total allocations in the program. For SOx, there was only one very minimal exceedance. The program does require these facilities with exceedances to reconcile their holdings by purchasing RTCs after such findings. Next slide. So another requirement of this audit is to review RTC trading activity and pricing. So staff tracks and records every one of the RTC trades for price and emissions. Through calendar year 2023, there have been $1.59 billion of RTCs traded since Reclaim started through this program. RTCs are either traded through discrete single years and are only good for their compliance year, or they can be traded as infinite year blocks, which is a package of all future discrete years. This chart does break down RTCs traded in calendar year 2023 based on value. And that value is down quite a bit from last year when we had our elevated RTC prices due to the large NOx shave. Next slide, please. So this slide shows prices for discrete year NOx RTCs traded in each calendar year. And we'll walk through the requirements triggered by these prices. But as you can see in the chart, there are several different compliance year RTCs that may be traded in any single calendar year by the different colors. RTC prices have generally risen from 2020 to 2022 calendar years. And there was that price volatility observed through the large NOx shave. In 2023, as you see there on the right, these prices are now decreasing as the reclaim shave has come to an end. But these prices are still above certain program reporting thresholds that we'll talk about. Next slide, please. At the beginning of the Reclaim program, about 30 years ago, there was a $15,000 per ton threshold established through Rule 2015, and that has not been updated. These exceedances require an evaluation of the compliance and enforcement aspects of the Reclaim program to ensure the regulation has the appropriate deterrent effects, or if the program needs to be amended. Upon board concurrence, this evaluation is then submitted to US EPA and CARB. With the recent emission shave, the threshold was previously exceeded, and staff conducted this analysis demonstrating that the enforcement aspects were appropriate, and the price increases were caused by the expected market dynamics as the program was designed. So with last year's audit, the board determined that although the exceedancies continued, no additional analysis or action was required as the situation was the same and the emission shave was continuing to be implemented. Next slide, please, Paul. So now for this year's analysis, although they are on the decline as expected, the prices are still above the reporting thresholds. Staff assessment remains the same as originally reported to the board in 2022, and the enforcement provisions in Rule 2004 are sufficient to ensure compliance. And this is a continuing and residual effect of the emission shave as facilities implemented their control strategies. Staff's recommendation is staying consistent, and we are recommending that the previous analysis is still representative, and no further changes to Rule 2004 are warranted, and the program is still working as designed. Next slide, please. So moving on to the rest of the audit, SOX discrete year RTC prices have remained low and are well below their program review thresholds. And next slide. And for infinite year block prices for both NOx and SOX, those as well are below their respective program review thresholds. Next slide, please. Thank you. Staff tracks trading activity by investors of RTCs who are not reclaimed facilities, and we reported in this audit. And those investors have remained very active in recent trades. The investor holdings of RTCs have been more or less consistent from last year, ranging from about 2 to 4%. Next slide, please. So the audit also requires reporting and review of specific parameters to be reported to ensure the program is working. Reclaim facilities reported overall job gains this year, and also staff assessed that federal NSR, new source review, offset ratios were met, and there were no significant shifts of emissions from winter to summer. Also, there's no evidence of increased health risk from the program, as these facilities are subject to the very same health risk and toxic air contaminant rules as other facilities we regulate. Next slide, please. Okay, I'll be walking through 2 conclusion slides. So for this first one, for the NOx RTC price threshold exceedances, the thresholds were exceeded last year for Rule 2015, and staff conducted the required analysis. The board previously approved that no further action was warranted beyond the current strategy of implementing BART, and the price exceedance has continued from last year. RTC prices are decreasing, but still above that threshold. Staff's recommendation will be the same, and no additional analysis is required for this reporting year, as the situation is the same. Staff will be recommending to the board that the reclaim program continue with no changes to the for Rule 2004 and those compliance provisions. And upon approval by the board, staff would then forward this report to CARB and EPA to fulfill those obligations. And separately, staff will continue to transition the reclaim program through the BART landing rules. And next slide, please, Paul. So the other conclusion from the audit is the reclaim audit showed programmatic compliance for both NOx and SOX and a high rate of facility compliance based on a review of 100% of the reclaim facilities. So although they are decreasing, as I said, RTC prices still exceeded the Rule 2015 threshold, but the reclaim program met all other program requirements, and staff will be recommending to approve the compliance year 2022 reclaim annual audit. And that concludes my presentation. I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Jason, for your presentation. Comments or questions from committee members? Online? In person? Seeing none, we'll ask for public comment. Is there anyone in the public who wishes to comment? Please raise your hand. Seeing none, we'll move on to our written reports. Is there any need? We have 2 colleagues, one on monthly update of staff's work with EPA and Another one on the notice of violation penalty summary. Is there any need to go over those? Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Just one question on notice of penalties, Larry. And I'd ask staff just now, there's a, and this is just kind of for public knowledge, who we permit. It's on the second of 5 pages. And going down to the left, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 down Macera Crematory. I see this, I was at a cremation last year, and it was interesting, all the black smoke coming out of the crematory. This one is a Rule 203 violation, to just see if staff has a general understanding of what that was, and maybe tell us just briefly, do we regulate crematories and permit, and what's the process? Just very quick, and what was this one about?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Briefly, our agency does regulate crematories and the emissions coming out of them. There are a number of permits relating to the cremation process, furnaces, that kind of thing. With respect to these violations, they related to permit conditions. So Rule 203, that's what it addresses. I had staff take a quick look. This had to do with daily gas usage, the timing of source tests, basically our standard enforcement program.
And we go out there, and do we regularly do inspections? How do we do that with crematories? Do we have a staff that looks at these specifically? You can just comment on that.
That's right, Vice Chair. With this particular facility, it's located in Santa Ana, and the community has raised the issue with us. And so our inspectors actually go out quite frequently, and we do on-site inspections as well as surveillance in the community.
It kind of jumped out at me because I saw the settlement was nearly $50,000, one of the highest for that month. So it must have been a pretty significant exceedance.
You know, I can't really speak to the negotiated process with our legal department, but I would notice that there have been a number of violations here, so that may have been part of the calculus.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on the written material? Seeing none, we'll ask for public comment. Is there anyone who wishes to comment on either item on this these written reports? Seeing none, we'll move on then to any other matters we need to talk about. If not, we'll have general public comment. Anyone in the public who wishes to comment on item not on the agenda, please raise your hand. Harvey. Harvey, you can unmute yourself. There you go.
Hello. Am I being heard?
You certainly are, Harvey.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name's Harvey Etter. I'm speaking for myself and for the Public Solar Power Coalition. Stationary sources. I had an ongoing conversation, to put it politely, with Phil Fine, who used to be with us and now is with the Bay Area District, and doing damage there. They passed kind of a solar order there without mentioning solar energy. It's pretty outrageous. Anyway, one thing we discussed, he said we could take all of our power plants and put them into solar, and we'll only save a couple tons of NOx a day. I said, yeah, but if we put them in electric vehicles and go, electrolysis with hydrogen, the fuel cells, we're going to save hundreds. All right. So the technology's there. It's been proven. The Sunshot program, which we brought to you all, first in 12, okay, 12 years ago. It wasn't dealt with then. There were 500 pages in that, and now there's 100 exhibits. So we told you how that we showed you that the numbers are changing, CO2 equivalent and all this, and the technology's there. And nobody's looking at it. It's like hiding the ball. We're getting purged. We got run out trying to get this into the SIP by federal marshals and the FBI. We tried to get a copy of the tape with working with you all and CARB and EPA, and we get nothing. Okay. Now people are dying. 1 million to 1.5 million people a year, according to the Lancet in 2018. All right. In 10 years, that's 10, 15 million. 20 years, that's 20, 30 million. This is a lot of deaths. Okay, that's right here in River City. That's more than all of our wars, all of them. Okay, This is your job. This is your responsibility. You're ignoring it, and it to be done. Equity and stuff. So with Piketty, the French economist, and 14 wrote Capital in the 21st Century, and in 20, Capital and Ideology. That for 2/3 of the country has seen in 40, 50 years no increase in income or equity at all. Productivity's gone up 70, 80%, all gone to 1%, 1/10, 1/100th of 1%. Okay, and I'm incorporating by reference this book in 2010, not by Stiglitz, Nobel laureate, Jewish guy. He's at Columbia now. He ran the World Bank. He said, "Equity, the price of equity. We're going to lose our democracy." Straight up. Okay, Biden, the day before the 3-year anniversary of the coup attempt, he said 22% of Democrats, 33% of Republicans say there's going to be political violence. That's what Trump wants. That's exactly what he wants, and he's trying to get us to fight. We got to change things. There should be no Republican Party. They swore the Constitution enough. Not even in this district, in any city or county in this state. We got to.
Thank you for your comments, Harvey. That brings us to the end of our meeting, and our next meeting will be March 15th at 10:30 a.m. Here. Thank you all for being here. Have a safe weekend. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great weekend.